have two confessions this morning to make as I get into the message. The first one is I really am excited to be back. 2 Sundays almost seems like too long to miss church. I don't know how some people miss 4, 5, and 6 weeks at a time, but 2 weeks is about drove me crazy to miss you guys. And so I just want you to know I'm excited to be here today. That sort of leads me to my second confession, and that is this. On December 20th, on Sunday morning, December 20th, just a few weeks ago, when I got into the car after church, I just let out this sigh. And I wasn't thinking about doing it. It just sort of happened. And so I got into the car and I just went, and Monica said, "What's wrong with you?" And I told her, I said, "I can't tell you how good it feels not to have to preach next week." Now, just in case you're wondering, that's really not a good thing for a preacher to say, but that's where I was at on December 20th. I was just like, I can't tell you how good it feels not to have to preach next week. And I didn't really even understand, what was I saying? I mean, that's just what came out. That was in the moment. That was just what was going on with Rick Harris at that time. In the next few days, I began to think about it, and there were 53 Sundays in 2015. And out of the 53 Sundays, I was here 50 of those 53 Sundays. And that doesn't seem so unusual. Many of you were probably at your job 50 out of 53 weeks or whatever. And I preached 49 of the 50 that I was here. There was one week we had that Crossroads Compassion, and they shared. And so I preached 49 of the 50. And again, that doesn't, to me, it really didn't seem like, I still don't understand why I'm so just spent at this moment. And then I realized, well, of the 3 that I missed, one was the very first Sunday of 2015, and one was the very last Sunday out of 2015. So I basically was here 50 out of 51 Sundays and preached 49 of the 50 that I was here, mainly most of those right in a row. And I wasn't so physically exhausted, but mentally and emotionally, I was done at that moment. It was sort of like, I just can't tell you how good it feels not to have to preach next week. And that isn't a place I want to be at or get to. And I consciously, probably, again, all this just sort of happened, I wasn't even thinking about sighing, and I'm sure Monica wasn't thinking about asking, and it just sort of, that's what was happening on December 20th. 2015 was one of those years. It had some ups, but it had a lot more downs. And, some of those friend-related, some of those family-related, some of those job-related, those kinds of things. And I don't know, all I can tell you is on December 20th, I was exhausted. And again, it wasn't physical, but mentally and emotionally, I felt like I was done. And it isn't somewhere you want to be, and it isn't somewhere I wanted to be. And to be honest with you, I have people who would probably tell me not to share this with you today because now you're going to look at me differently. But I'm just trying to be honest this morning as we start 2016. And it was a few days later that across my Facebook feed, this little thing came across, and I actually took a screenshot of it so I could share it. Now all I got to do is find it, get through all my Passion pictures. And here's what it said. In fact, there's a Passion picture before it and after it, so it must have happened while I was at Passion. It's one of these things, I have a buddy who posts these all the time, pray for your pastor, and he's a pastor, and he posts those things all the time. And this thing here, it says 70% of pastors battle depression. And I know what you're thinking, well, don't you have the best boss in the universe? Yeah. But 70% of pastors battle depression. 1,500 pastors quit each month. Of those who are pastors, only 10% will retire a pastor. 80% feel discouraged. 78% have few or no close friends. So then I begin to think, well, maybe it isn't just me. Maybe it's pastors. And to be honest with you, until 2015, I haven't experienced any of this. So then I begin to think, you know what, Rick, maybe for 7 years you've been blessed that you've never fallen into that discouraged category. You've never fallen into that, and again, I wouldn't say I was depressed, but what I'm explaining to you, I haven't experienced that until this year. I really hadn't felt it till December 20th. So I began to think, well, maybe it isn't just me. Maybe it's all pastors. And maybe for 7+ years, I've just been truly blessed not to experience that. And then I started digging a little deeper. And I found this study from February of last year that a large number of people are stressed. Regardless of what their job situation is, regardless of what their home situation is, by and large across this country, most of us feel stress. In fact, anybody want to take a guess at what the number one thing we're stressed about is? Money. In fact, 72% of the people that were surveyed for this study, and this was a pretty extensive study, 72% said they stress about money a lot. Like it isn't just a passing thing. It's a weekly thing. It's a daily thing. It's one of those where you get your paycheck and you know that plus a little bit more is already spent. And so 72% deal with that a lot. Work was number 2. The economy was number 3. Family was 4, and health was 5 of what people stress about in our country. The study went into defining. I don't think we really need much definition of this, but what happens when we're stressed? Well, when we're irritable. Monica would probably tell you that through the last 3 to 4 months of the year, she would say to me from time to time, "You're grumpy today." And that's not usually me. I'm not a grumpy guy. I don't walk around mad all the time. But she said several times, in fact, to the point that I'd be like, "Well, I'm not grumpy today." Yeah. Now I'm mad, but I'm not grumpy. But that's one of the effects of stress. And you're familiar with that. We get nervous. We have lack of motivation. We feel fatigued. We feel overwhelmed. We feel depressed. And so many of us in this room today are dealing with this. The study went a little further to tell us, how do we cope with our stress? How do we cope with our stress? Anybody want to take a crack at what's number 1? Huh? It's on the list, but it's not number 1. Now, number 1 is television. Television is the way that most of us cope, the top way that most of us cope with that. And internet was number 2. Now, here's what's funny. In the younger crowd, probably those 30 and below, internet was number 1. Television was number 2 of how they cope with stress. Number 3, for all the categories, was sleep. Number 4 was eat. Number 5, again, this sort of flips. Number 5 and 6 were drinking and smoking. And in the younger crowd, more people drank than smoked. In the older crowd, more people smoked than drank. And this isn't a message about drinking, but how many times have you heard somebody say, "I just need a drink"? Right? It's how we cope with our stress. And usually, we're smart enough to know this and have experienced it enough that we know that drinking and sleeping and eating and none of that solves our stress. And some of those even add to our stress. I could tell you that a burrito has never solved my money problems. In fact, sometimes it adds to my money problems. But all I can explain to you guys is that I begin to think, okay, well, maybe it's not just me. And I thought about this last night late while I was watching the Cincinnati game. Here's the way I could describe how I felt on December 20th. I felt the same way all you teachers felt the Friday that started Christmas break. See, now I see heads. Nah, I got you. Now I'm tracking with you. Now I know where you're at. And that's how I felt. And I began to think, well, maybe it's not just me, and maybe it isn't just pastors. Maybe it's really all of us. that are dealing with stress, that are dealing with anxiety, that are dealing with just emotional fatigue, that this mental exhaustion. Again, I don't know, you may even be physically tired, physically pushed, but I just know for me it was mental, it was emotional. It was like I just can't do it anymore. And so that's what brought me to this first series that we're going to do this year called Margin. Margin, because margin is something that we're familiar with, but not many of us talk about. Maybe if you've been lucky enough to go to some leadership type events or leadership things, you may have heard margin mentioned. Maybe if your company sort of takes leaders off and teaches them and trains them, you may hear them use the word margin. But by and large, we don't talk a lot about margin in our life. We don't talk a lot about margin in our society. Because quite honestly, our society is trying to squeeze all the margin out of your life and mine. We have to have a working definition. So this is sort of our working definition for the next few weeks. Margin is the amount available above what is actually needed. The amount above what is actually needed. It's money that's more than you need to pay your bills. It's time and rest that is more than you need. The extras or the reserves. I mean, let's just all be honest. Would you rather have 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night or 2 or 3? Right? We understand. We wouldn't want to be in that cycle of 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. Would you rather have no money at the end of the month, or would you rather have $200 extra that was there at the end of the month after all the bills were paid, just as reserves, extra? Would you rather have 5 homemade cooked meals a week or 1? Well, probably depends on who's cooking, right? But many of us are running around so busy and so frazzled that we're taking kids from this place to that place, from A to B. And I was thinking this morning as I was going over my notes, sometimes we're literally driving in the car, putting food in our mouth that we're not even looking at. Right? It's a McDonald's Happy Meal. We don't even look. We're just grabbing the fries out of the thing, sticking them in our mouth. We're grabbing the cheeseburger or the nugget. We don't even look at it. Would you rather have 363 days of health this year, or 263 days? You see, the reality is our culture is trying to squeeze our margin from all of us. Not just me, and not just preachers or pastors, but school teachers and nurses and business people, students. And our culture, our U.S. culture, is trying to squeeze our margin from us. And we have to be diligent about keeping margin in our lives. It's very easy for all of us to fall into the trap of letting our margin get squeezed. Do you realize there's cultures in the world that have 3 and 4 day work weeks? Like the whole country. Not just a business, but the whole country has 3 and 4 day work weeks. There's some cultures throughout the world where they take 2 to 3 hours during the middle of the day and close. You can go home, get you a good healthy lunch, take a nap, come back at 2 o'clock. But not in the U.S., right? Our bosses are pushing us for more. Our bosses are squeezing us for more. Our bosses, the people that we work for, the people that we work with, our culture is trying to squeeze our margin out of our life. I talk to Mr. Clower all the time, and he talks about the day when he played 3 and 4 sports. Why? Because there was one baseball season, there was one football season, there was one basketball season. It wasn't baseball that went for 9 months, and football that went for 9 months, and basketball that went for 12 months. It was these times. You remember the old Andy Griffith Show? Sitting on the porch going, remember when we used to have the old band down at the gazebo, and they get this great idea of, hey, let's rebuild that. Let's go do that again. And they end up working so hard on Sunday. They got to redo the uniforms. They got to get the band together, and they sound horrible. They got to rebuild the gazebo, and they go through all of this on Sunday to have this nice relaxing evening. And by the end of it, they're all like, man, we're just pooped. I'm too pooped to have a concert. That's what our culture is like, is what our culture is trying to do to us. It's trying to squeeze our margin. And it's trying to squeeze your margin in your life. And it's up to you to protect it. But you know what happens? when our margin gets squeezed, we're not ourselves. Right? That's what makes Monica say, man, you're grumpy today, when I'm not usually grumpy. That's what makes somebody, are you in a bad mood? Well, now. That's what happens when our margin gets squeezed. We're not like yourself. I actually have a gift for you today. I have a gift for you today that I think it's going to help you when you leave here. Let me get Robbie and I need young guys. Connor, will you come help me? And then I need Caleb. I see you there. All right. I want you to go up your section. Give everybody one of those. You go up your section. Make sure everybody gets one of those. And Connor, you make sure everybody gets one in the middle. I have this for you today as a gift.
He just got that out of his mouth.
All right. Right? You're not yourself. Have a Snickers. Yeah? So I want to make sure everybody gets one of these. Now, if you have a peanut allergy, don't open it. If you just started that New Year's diet, set it aside for later. But right, that's what the commercial says, right? You're not yourself. Have a Snickers. And can I... Huh? Because y'all need to see mine. Mine's the example. I'll trade you later. So here's what I want you to do with this. I want you to take this home with you today. If it makes it home, you may eat it on the way from here to the restaurant. But I want you to take it home and I want you to put it somewhere so this week you can look and just sort of keep out. Am I myself today? Am I myself today? Wow, there were extras. Okay. I figured this was one of those things. Oh, can I get one for my neighbor? I really want to share with them. Yeah. But actually, it's just 2 mini bars, not a whole bar. So, but anyway. But I want you to take it home because I want you to look at it this week and say, am I myself today? Have I been myself today? Or am I, like Rick, am I grumpy today? Is my margin getting squeezed in my life today? And I'm just here to tell you from practical experience and from what I know that if you don't protect it, our culture will take it. And for those of you that are families with children, I'm going to tell you, if you don't protect your kids' margin, the culture will take your kids' margin. And so I want to talk to us today about the fact that long ago, God knew this. And long ago, God made provision for margin. And so we're going to look back and look through the scriptures today. And throughout the course of the next several weeks, we're going to look at different ways that our culture is trying to squeeze our margin and try to give real specific helps and real specific answers of how we can protect our margin and put margin into our lives. So to do this, we're going to go all the way back to Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. And we're going to look at where God was so much wiser than we are that He built margin into creation. He created margin. God created margin. And in Genesis chapter 2, we know what Genesis chapter 1 is, right? Well, in Genesis chapter 2, something very interesting happens. It's up here on the screen. Genesis chapter 2, it says this. It says, so the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them were completed. So chapter 1 is done. God's created everything. And so we're going to look at that in just a minute. It said on the seventh day, God had finished His work of creation. So He rested from all of His work. Keep going. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy because it was the day when He rested from all of His work of creation. God built margin into creation. God created margin. He didn't just take 6 days and create all that He created. And get this, God didn't create margin because He needed it. He created margin because He knew we were going to need it. Because, as one preacher said, everything that you see, all of creation that you see, and even all the universe that you can't see, that's just but one little thought of God. And remember, God just said, hey, let there be, and it was. So it wasn't like God was taking clay and molding planets and molding universes and molding so. I mean, He just spoke it, and it was there. So it wasn't that He needed this rest. It wasn't that He was exhausted. He wasn't emotionally spent like we get so many times. But he said, I'm going to build in this margin into life, that on the seventh day you rest. Now, there was a time, and many of you are familiar with this, that our world, our country rested. It was probably Mr. Clower's generation where there wasn't anything open on Sundays. I remember in the 70s that the gas station was open, maybe a grocery store might be open, and maybe a restaurant being open. And what's really odd is that nowadays Chick-fil-A is noticed nationwide as being the one that what? Closes on Sunday. You see, Kathy has kept margin in the Chick-fil-A business. He has kept margin for his employees. He's kept margin. Now let me tell you, 6 days a week, those suckers work hard. You don't ever go into a Chick-fil-A and it's not busy, right? So those people, they work 6 days, they're working hard. Their managers are working, their owners are working, their employees are working. But on the seventh day, stay home and rest. Go worship your God. And there was a day that was more like that, but nowadays they're the ones that are noticed for that. God created margin. But not only did He create it, He commanded it. He commanded it. In Exodus chapter 16, God takes it a step further. Listen to this. Oh, this is going to be a doozy because I didn't bring my glasses. Verse 16. These are the Lord's instructions. Now what has happened here is the people are in the wilderness, and God's giving them manna. Manna is sort of this flaky bread, and every day they would come out, the ground would be covered with manna, and these are the instructions of what they're supposed to do with it. These are the Lord's instructions. Each household should gather as much as it needs. Pick up 2 quarts for each person in your tent. So the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over, and those who gathered only a little had enough. Each family had just what it needed. Now I'm going to tell you this came to me last night, that God never commands us or asks us to do something He doesn't make provision for. And so when He was telling these people, look, you go out, you get 2 quarts a person for your household, and that's going to be, He commanded them to go do that. He instructed them to go do that, and He made provision for it. Verse 17, so the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Oh, I think I just read that, didn't I? Each family had just what it needed. Oh, verse 19, then Moses said to them, do not keep any of it till morning. I want you to get this. Do not keep any of it till morning. But some of them didn't listen and kept some of it till morning. So they kept a little extra. They were a little worried that the next day the provision wasn't going to be there, right? So we will keep a little bit back. But by the next morning, it was full of maggots and had a terrible smell. It was real easy to identify who had disobeyed. Moses was very angry with them. After this, the people gathered the food morning by morning, each family according to its need. And as the sun became hot, the flakes they had not picked up melted and disappeared. Get this, on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much as usual. 4 quarts for each person instead of 2. Then all the leaders of the community came and asked Moses for this explanation. Here's what he told them. This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today and set aside what is left for tomorrow. So here's what's interesting about that. 5 days out of the week, if you keep any of it, if you get a little extra or you don't eat all that you got and you keep a little, it's going to be full of maggots and it's going to stink your house up. But on the 6th day, he's telling you, go get twice as much as you're going to need, because tomorrow you're not going to pick out any. In fact, tomorrow none's coming. So you go out on Saturday, pick up, or you go out on the 6th day, it wasn't there Saturday, pick up all that you need. You pick up 4, not 2 quarts a person, and it doesn't spoil on the 6th day. You following me? In other words, God said, look, here's what I'm commanding you to do. And so if you disobey me, the other 5 days it's going to turn into maggots. It's going to stink up your house. But on the 6th day, I'm telling you, go get twice as much. And you're going to keep it for the next day, because the next day there's none's coming and you're not going out to pick it up. Because it's a day of rest. God, not only did he create margin because he knew we were going to need it, but he commanded margin. In fact, in Exodus chapter 20, it makes the top 10 list. You know, Moses goes up to the mountaintop and he gets the 10 commandments. And here's what it says on verse 8. It says, remember to observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. That 7th day is supposed to be dedicated to the Lord our God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, any of the foreigners living among you. But for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the 7th day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. So our Sabbath day is supposed to be our margin. Now, our Sabbath day for us on our calendar is our Sunday. That wasn't, God didn't create Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. God created the sun comes up and the sun goes down. And so for 6 days, the sun comes up and the sun goes down. But on the 7th day, when it comes up, you rest. You rest. You don't rest because you're necessarily tired. You rest to remember the Lord. You rest to focus on Him. You rest. And that's why in our country, nothing was open on Sunday. Why? Because it was supposed to be the day that everybody came together to worship the Lord, to worship our God. Gosh. So God created margin and God commanded margin. Now, this next one's a little step further, but it's very, very interesting with this. And I was hoping Kyle would be in here today. They're up in the preschool, I guess, because he would understand this better than most of us. But God even required rest for the land. He even required rest for the land as it was going to create crops. In Leviticus chapter 25, it says, while Moses was on Mount Sinai, the Lord said to him, give the following instructions to the people of Israel when you have entered the land I am giving you. The land itself must observe a Sabbath rest before the Lord every 7th year. For 6 years may you plant your fields and prune your vineyards and harvest your crops. But the 7th year the land must have a Sabbath year of complete rest. It is the Lord's Sabbath. Do not plant your fields or prune your vines during the year. And do not store away the crops that grow on their own, or gather the grapes from your unpruned vines. The land must have a year of complete rest. And so, basically, God created margin, not because He needed it, because He knew we were going to need it. He commanded the people to take the Sabbath day and to observe it and to keep it holy and to use that as your margin, to use that as your rest. In fact, God never said only work 5 days a week. He said do it 6 days, whatever you need to do. In 6 days, do your work. In 6 days, do your hobbies. In 6 days, do whatever you need to do. But on the 7th day, you should rest. And you should keep it holy. Remember the Sabbath. Remember to worship your God. So not only did God create it and God command it, but what I want to tell you today is sort of the verses for this series is that God honors margin in our lives. God honors margin. God honors it when you protect the margin in your life. God honors it when you protect the margin in your family. God honors it when you protect the margin in your finances. God honors it when you protect the margin in your life. In Ephesians chapter 5, it says, so be careful how you live. Be careful how you live. Hey, your culture may be trying to squeeze you one way. Be careful how you live. He says, don't live like fools, but live like those who are wise. And I just, right there, I think it makes a cool point, because I don't think you want anybody coming to your funeral going, what a fool. Right? Now, there's some people that I know are very, very wise. In fact, they do, and they have things going on in their lives, and I'm like, how did they even have the foresight to see that? How did they even think about that? How did they even know to do that? And I would say, man, they're very wise people. And I have a few people that I know that I'm like, man, that was foolish. That was dumb. They shouldn't be doing it. Wow, that was very foolish. And the reality is, none of us want to be looked at as a fool. We would all want to be seen as wise, right? We would all want to make the decisions in your life and mine that people would say, that was a very wise decision. And none of us want to be the people that God would look at and say, that was foolish. What a fool. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. It says, do not act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. Do not be drunk with wine, because that will ruin your life. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs among yourselves, and making music to the Lord in your hearts. And give thanks for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. God honors margin. God honors it when we put margin in our lives. God honors it when we don't emotionally spend ourselves, when we don't mentally expend ourselves, when we don't physically overextend ourselves. God honors it in your life and mine when we build margin into our life. God honors it when we build margin into our families. Verse 19, we just sang those very words. It said, pop verse 19 back up there. It says, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs among yourselves. Didn't we just sing just 15, 20 minutes ago? It's your breath in my lungs. And so I sing out your praise. Part of what we need to do in our lives is we need to live as wise and not as foolish. We need to not act thoughtlessly. We need to not act without thought for the future of those decisions. We need to respond. We need to be thankful. We need to sing praises and psalms and spiritual songs to our God. And so as we dig into this thing about margin, you may be saying, well, how do I have a Sabbath day? What do I do? What is a Sabbath day? And so I want to give you just 4 real practical tips on how you can have a Sabbath. And I realize it may not be for you on Sunday. We have a lot of people who work different days and different hours. Some of you work weekends. Some of you work rotating shifts where it hits about every second or third Sunday. A lot of different things. And so maybe Sunday isn't your Sabbath. Maybe Sunday is a busy day of work for you. But there should be some day in your week, some day in your life and time that is a Sabbath, a time to rest. And here's some things to practically do. 1, pay attention to what you have. Sometimes we are so busy running around, so busy with all that we're doing, we don't take opportunities to sit around and look at where we're at. I have some holes leaking in my roof right now, and I can take all of my life and energy to focus on that hole. It's not a big hole, but I could take all my time and energy to focus on that hole, or I could realize, you know what, I have a roof. So we need to pay attention to what we have. Pay attention to how God has blessed us. Make time to play. Whatever is your hobby, whatever is your enjoyment, you need to have time in your life to do that. I know some of you that have different hobbies, but if I were to ask you when was the last time you did that, you would say, well, I'm just too busy. Part of putting margin into your life is putting margin for those things that you enjoy. And God created all of us differently. I'll just tell you that right now is my heyday. I love college basketball. You've heard me say that for 8 years now. I love this time of year. I love basketball Monday night, Tuesday night, Saturday, Sunday. I love college basketball. I just love watching. I'll even watch teams I don't even like. I'll even watch Duke play if I have to. But I just love college basketball. Now that's my thing. That may not be your thing. Your thing may be reading a book. Your thing may be going and looking at antiques. Your thing may be riding around looking at houses. Whatever your hobby is, you need to make time in your life to play, and you need to protect the margin so that you have time to do that. I did go to the gym the other day and play basketball, and I realized that at 15, I wanted to play basketball, and now at 48, I really like watching basketball. You need to enjoy the meal. Again, we're such a fast food, Happy Meal generation that some of us don't even look at the food that we're eating. We're driving from point A to point B, from this practice to that practice, to this lesson to that lesson. We're just so busy that we literally get a bag of food in the car and we just dig our hand in and pull out some fries, and we need to just sit down and take our 26 bites for our meal. One of the things I've been able to do with Austin and Blake is last year I took Austin to Passion. That was one of the things on my bucket list. This year I got to take Blake to Passion. That was one of the things on my bucket list. And to try to make it just sort of special, sort of a father-son type of thing, we went to the Sundial Restaurant. Anybody been to the Sundial Restaurant? You know what I'm talking about, right? It's the one at the top of the big hotel that sort of rotates. And don't get all excited. It's not a carnival ride. It's not a roller coaster. But because you barely know you're moving if you don't pick out a point of reference and go, okay, I just moved. But we go up there, and I mean, it's only 2 times I've ever been up there. And what's cool about it is when you go there, you know it's a different kind of place. And so you dress up a little bit better. And so me and Blake had been wearing jeans or whatever. We wore some nicer pants and nicer shoes and nicer outfit. We go up there. They treat you actually a little bit nicer than McDonald's. You might be surprised. Is this your first time here? Oh, okay. Well, let me just tell you about this. What would you like to drink? Can I get you some bread? Let me bring you some bread. And so you go through this whole thing. And last year I did something really, I said, I'm going to try something different. Okay, hey, this is a big fancy meal. It's fancy stuff on here. I'm going to try something different. I also said, I'm getting the steak. Austin made the right choice. I'm over there eating whatever it was, and just a little, like that much of it. And Austin's got this big old steak. So all year I knew when I take Blake, I'm getting the steak. And so sure enough, they have the steak on there, and we look at the menu, and they had chicken and dumplings. But chicken and dumplings in a fancy restaurant, I don't know. They had all sorts of different things, but I stuck with it. I'm getting the steak. And they bring out this steak, and it's not huge. It's not like it's the biggest steak I've ever ate, but I think it's the best steak I've ever ate. So much so that when you cut into it, you get a little piece. You just savor it. You enjoy it. And at $50, you make it last as long as it possibly can. So would I rather live in a life that I could cut and enjoy? Or would I rather live in a life that's full of Happy Meals and Chick-fil-A kids meals and digging my hand into a bag of food just to do this? It's margin. And so part of having a Sabbath is to enjoy a good meal. Enjoy a good meal. Take time that you can actually sit down and eat it. And here's the last one, and it's the most important one. But as part of your Sabbath, sit in the stillness with Christ. God created the Sabbath as a day to keep it holy for Him. As a day that on that day, hey, you ain't got to work, so think about me. You ain't got to go out and get your food. You've already got to think about me. You ain't got to worry about your animals today. Worry about me. Focus on me. And so on your Sabbath, whatever that day is for you, whatever that day of rest is, you need to have a time. This isn't your quiet time. That should be every day. Your prayer life should be consistent throughout the day. But this is a time when you can just sit and listen. See how awkward that is? Silence. Y'all are waiting for me to say something? I'm wanting to say something. It's so awkward. But you need to have time in your life that you can just sit in silence and listen for God's voice. Can I tell you about 3 days after December 20th, of having several days of not having to think about preaching the next Sunday, of having several days of I can, begin to refresh, sort of like the refresh button on your computer. That all of a sudden it was like my mind opened up. I don't know if you ever had a pipe that was clogged and you sort of talking to it, but on the other end of the pipe you can't understand what's being said. But then when you clear the pipe, you understand it clearly. It was sort of like that. And after about 3 or 4 days, my mind just began to open up, and God was showing me things, and God was showing me things in His Word. God was showing me plans for this year. God was showing me this sermon series and how to open it. All of a sudden, it was when I had some time to have some margin, it's like I could sit and listen finally. Instead of having to think, what am I preaching next week? What meeting do I got today? What meeting do I got tomorrow? What meeting do I got next week? What's that third thing I got to do? I got to do that. I got the medical clinic. I got to... Margin. God created it because He knew that we would need it. God commanded it because He knew that we would be stubborn and not take it. And so He said, look, margin, 7th day, keep it holy. I want to encourage you today. I want to ask you one question. I want to encourage you to do one thing. Here's the question for you. When is your Sabbath? When is your Sabbath? Is it today? It may very well be today. Maybe today you come and you worship your God, and maybe you go home and rest and you get ready for the week. Maybe today is your Sabbath, but for some in here, maybe it's not today. In fact, to be quite honest, maybe some of you are busier this afternoon than you would be throughout the week. When is your Sabbath? You have to have a Sabbath. When is your Sabbath? Here's the thing I want to encourage you to do. There's a study, a Bible study on Right Now Media that our church subscribes to. And I want to encourage you over these next several weeks to do this study. And I did it this way. I got them to pull some screenshots up. It's called Take It to the Limits by Andy Stanley. And if you go to Right Now Media, how many of you are already logged into Right Now Media? All right, several. If you haven't, what I want you to do on that connection card that I talked to you about earlier is I want you to write your name and your email address. That's all I need. And then write Right Now Media. If you're not logged into that, get me that information. Just a little bit, we're going to take up our offering, and you just drop it in there. I'll get you logged on. I'll send you a personal invitation. It doesn't cost you anything. The church pays the fee. And so you go in and you can do these Bible studies. And on the page, if you're on the computer, now they actually have an app for your iPad. They have an app for your phone. And those look a little differently. But you see right over to the left there where it says the Vine Church, right? You just go there and you click on the Vine Church, and then this next screen will pop up. And right there, the very first one, I put it there on purpose, says Take It to the Limit by Andy Stanley. And you click on that, and it'll take you to this screen. This is the page of this Bible study. And you see right down here on the bottom right corner, Lesson 1, Less is More, Andy Stanley, 38 minutes. Here's what I'm asking you to do. At some point during this week, watch that study. 38 minutes. You can do all 38 minutes at one time. You can break it up in a couple sessions, whatever you want to do. But watch that 38 minutes. And each week, I want to encourage you to do Session 2, Session 3, Session 4. Because this will help us build margin into our lives. It's talking about margin. So my goal for you for 2016 is not to become busier, but to build margin in your life. Because I know that when you build margin into your life, God honors it. One, because you're obeying Him. And He'll honor that. He'll honor your family. He'll honor your marriage. He'll honor your life. But what I also know is this, the flip side of that same coin. When you don't, man, your culture is just going to keep squeezing you. It's just going to keep taking your time. Your boss has no problem with you giving them 10 free hours a week. That boss is not worried whether you stay up at 11 or 12 o'clock at night doing your work, or if you've got it done in your 8 hours throughout the day. Your boss will let you work as hard as you want to work for them. Your kid's ball team, hey, your kid's ball team, he don't have a problem if he needs 3 more practices that week. He don't have a problem taking some more days. Your students, your teacher doesn't have a problem if you wait to the last minute to do all your homework. And so on one certain day, you got 8 hours of homework to do. They don't have a problem with that. That was your decision. But what I know is, if you won't build margin into your life, my fear is that many of us will experience what I experienced on December 20th. That you will come to the end of a rope where you will feel hopeless, helpless, you will feel depressed, you will feel fatigued, you will feel overwhelmed. And so I'm going to encourage you this year to build margin into your life. Now I'm going to give you a very frank warning because I know our world that we live in. Here's what a lot of people will do. Oh, the pastor just said I needed margin. My margin is going to be Sunday morning from 10 to 12. I need some time to rest, Pastor. I'm not coming to church. You need to be in the house of God, worshiping God on your Sabbath. Part of your margin needs to be a time when you're refreshing yourself with the people of God around the Word of God and the songs of God to help you get through the week. So your margin doesn't need to cut out God. Your margin needs to put more God in your life. God is more important than your practice. He is. He is more important, and you may not believe this, He is more important than your job. He is more important than your marriage. He is more important than anything else in life. And when we will live in a way that recognizes that, and we will live in a way that will honor that, and we will live in a way that will have a Sabbath and build margin in our life so that we can honor Him, then He will bless all of those other things that I just listed. So building margin into your life is not saying, well, God's the only one that's not going to come down on my head on Tuesday if I don't have that project done. Saying I need to find some time Monday, I got to build God in. I want to encourage you to do that. When is your Sabbath? Just answer that question. And then watch session 1 of Take It to the Limit. And each week I'm going to ask you to do the next session 2, session 3, whatever. So if you're just the overachiever, the type A student, and you're going to watch all 5 of them this week, then knock yourself out. Just don't tell anybody else what the deal is. But I want to encourage you to do that. Because I really am. I guess if anything, December 20th scared me more than anything. Because I don't, as a preacher, I don't ever want to get to the point of saying, I don't want to preach next week. But I guess it brought to my mind that if I'm not careful with my life, if I don't build margin into my life, if I don't build margin into my life, that I could end up there again. And I don't want you to end up there. Let's pray.